So I will start with this question, and it is why security matters, and what makes it sometimes developers don't care about security. So maybe here in Europe that is not so popular, but in other parts of the world it's really popular that anyone in the developer team is taking care of security until some things go wrong. And I will show you now some statistics. This is for United States, and they have this a 54% of increase in data breaches just in the first 6 months of this year. And they also have reported around like 3,800 data breaches in the first 6 months of the year. And those statistics says too that just 3 billion information data were exposed in just 8 of those data breaches. So we are having a lot of data branches now in the system, and this is full of any security. And now I have this other example. It's a little bit old, but it's a really good example. How many of you know Equifax? Some guys, right? So Equifax has a big data breach in September of 2017. Was at the same time with the problem that Facebook and Cambridge Analytics. This was something really huge. Equifax is a customer credit company that works in United Kingdom, Canada, and United States. And they have nothing, any layer of security. And here are some statistics. So they say that to their systems were uploading around like 38,000 driver license and 3,200 password details. But they also have information stolen, officially reported. We have this, around like 106 million names, dates of birth, and social security numbers. Also 99 millions of address and 209,000 payment credit card numbers and expiration dates. So they have more sensitive information that also were stolen in this data branch. So this was really critical, right? They are having, these hackers have also information of credit, of the credit of the customers, and also have the address of those customers. So it's really serious. Now here in Europe we have the GDPR regulations, so we need to take care of security. If not, we will need to pay fees about that. And I want to finish this small section saying that the security really is a team effort, because as usually we listen in things like, no, it's the security expert that need to take care about that, but this is not. Usually the security expert is just a person that we established what things we need to do in our system for make them secure, but we will the developers, the ones that will implement that security. The next thing is that security is in all levels to our system. It's something in the network security, device security, in the side of application, infrastructure, data, and also identity security. So this is the agenda that we will, with the topics that we'll cover during this talk. So we will start talking about the REST API design and a little bit of OAuth. Then I will talk about JWTs. Then we will talk about the user credentials problems, where is identity management, and where is identity and access management. And then we will have something about best practices, so how we can have a successful identity management project. There are a few questions that we need to make in the team before to start a project. And then we will talk about identity as a service, the architecture level, and if we have time, I will show you a small demo. So my name is Mercedes Bis. I am from Guatemala. Yes, I traveled from Guatemala to here for a speak at the conference. I also run 2 communities in Guatemala. One is a Java chapter of females. Yeah, I taught you nothing, my friend. What? He will go to see. I will continue, right? And I also have a Google community. I also was in the Java users group there. And I am recognized for the Oracle Groundbreakers ambassadors and the OutZero ambassadors too. Okay, great. So now we have this about the bad API design in REST APIs. So I saw this approach in many places around the world. It's like we have a REST API, and what do the developer is required to the clients in every single request to a REST API send the username and the password. So that means that they are making always an authentication process when we are accessing one endpoint in the REST API. So this is a wrong approach. So we need to make only one authentication and then just run an authorization process. The other wrong with this approach is that we are forcing the client to save the credentials, because we will not require to our user to introduce the username and the password in every single transactions that they want to do. So becoming another problem is save these credentials in a wrong way in the client side. So we always here can, for example, save that in an unencrypted mode or in a way that anyone have access to those credentials. And this is why I will show this diagram for OAuth. So how establish at OAuth that we will handle these situations? So we have a client app. In this case, we have this representation of the OAuth server that can be inside our same REST client API. And we have the resource server. So the client app will require a token to the OAuth server. That is basically the authentication process. So if the credentials are correct, the OAuth server will generate, well, we'll continue. We'll generate a token and we'll send that token to the client. And now the client will save that token instead to save the credentials, right? Then always that we will want to connect to the server resource, we will send this token instead to the credentials. And these resource servers, we run a process to authorization. We send the token to this resource to the OAuth server. For verify if this is a valid token, it's correctly signed, is not expired, and also if this user has permission to access the information that he is requiring. Okay, good. So this is the step 4, that the client send this token to the resource server, and the resource server in the file validate that token with the OAuth server, and it is valid and have permissions to consume that information, so we'll return to the resource server successful flag for they return to the client that information. Exists a wrong approach sometimes with the section of authorization. And is that sometimes developers delegate the authorization section in the client side. What I mean with that is that after a user make the login, we return to the client and say, this is a user that have these permissions. And we make a configuration in the client side, establishing which permissions has, and we show only those things. But what happened in a website? A user can have the endpoint to some functionality that they don't have access, and access directly to the endpoint. And if we are not making an authorization process in our resource server, they will access that information instead when they don't have permissions. So for these tokens, we use JWT. How many of you listening before about JWTs? So, good. I go to some talks that some guy is like, don't want, raise the hand. So JWTs are an open standard that was created for transport information in a JSON format, but in an encrypted way. Simple JWT is that, something that have a header and the claims. But what happened with these JWTs is that anyone can take the JWT, see the information, and also modify that information. So we need to combine the JWT standard with the JWS, that is the JSON Web Signature. So what we are doing here is adding a signature to this token. So anyone equals can take the token, see the information, but they cannot change the information, because when we verify the token, if they change the information, will not correspond to the signature. So we can detect that this token was corrupted. So we have quite some signature algorithms. Here is really important. Doesn't matter if I choose the best encryption algorithm if I am using a wake key. So we need to choose a good signature algorithm and also a good key. So we will explore now the JWT with a signature. Now we have the header, the claims, and the signature. And this is an unencrypted JWT. So in the header, we have the algorithm that we are using for encrypt this token, and also the type of the token. So this standard have other ones. Then we have the claims, and finally we have how is created the signature. So exploring a little bit of that, here we have an interesting claim that is the sub. Something that happened about JWTs is that now developers say, so I will send the username and the password in the JWT, and this is also a wrong approach. The idea is that only the username know the username and their credentials and only be stored in the database. And anyone in this life cycle will know those credentials. So we use this sub for identify which user we are is identified this JWT. So don't precisely need to be the username or the email address to this identity. We can create other username or a specific identifier. So then we have this other one, the scopes. This is if we want to handle which permissions have this user in the side of the JWT. And other thing that I like to mention is this type signet. Because when we are using JWTs, this always will be JWT. And sometimes some libraries ignore or skip the use of this claim. So we need to be consistent about how libraries we will use, taking in advance in a big system. We are not using always the same programming language or the same library in all the parts. I'm talking if we have mobile applications, if we have IoT devices, we have the backend, we have a frontend, everything making in different programming language. So these are some registered claims that we have. We have some interesting. This is the JTA. This is a unique identifier. For example, we can have, for example, permanent or opening sessions like Facebook, and we are using, for example, always the same token. But what happens if I want that this token we use it only once? So I will create a special identifier to that token, and always that this token make a transaction, I will register that JTA was used before. Instead to say, for example, in the database the entire token, and I will generate a new token that I will return with the transactions to the client. So that means that one token can be used only once. The next thing is the sub that we watched before, that is for identifier the user that is identifier this token. The next one is the issuer. This is used when different parts of our system will create tokens. So in that case, I will create a special token that we represent which entity in all the system create this JWT. And then we have this, the expiration, that is with tokens that have a session timeout, for example. So I will say this token will expire in 5 minutes. So if I make a request or our client make a request after those expiration time, this will not be a valid transaction for the expiration of this token. So JWTs can solve many things, and we are talking of them here for just for solve authentication and authorization process. So I have this other diagram, if someone have not clear here, but I think that you have that clear. And it's like authentication process is when a user make a login in our system. And the authorization process is when they make a request after a login in the system, and we will verify that this is a valid user, is a valid token, and also that user has permissions to access the information that they are requiring. So I suggest you, if you want to go more in deep about JWTs, go to jwt.io. It's a really good website. I also have recommendation of libraries for basically any programming language, and also read this handbook. They have other examples, for example, how implement an identity federations or use stateless client sessions with JWTs. So what are doing when we are using JWTs is that we are improving how our client is having communication with the REST APIs. Now we will talk about the user credentials problem. There also is not only a problem with the user credential, it's an entire technology industry problem. So also us as developers are users, right? So where is the password of the system? It's like QWERTY. Yeah, this is not a secure password, right? So we have a problem with this, and one of the first problems is that we in the industry are offering to our users only a single signing on as a single only method for make logging in systems. And what happened with this approach is that this approach requires a password. And in the teach industry, we are not handling in a correct way those passwords. And this is why all those data branches are a huge problem. Because always that we have a big data branch, as usually passwords are exposed. Why? Because passwords are not being saved, encrypted in the databases. So why we are not saving this password encrypted? It's so critical information. So then this is why we are entering then to other systems and say, you need to change your password because we have a data branches and your password was exposed. Other of the problems that we have with this is that users usually use the same password for all the systems, the same credentials. So that means that hackers have a bunch of information, usernames and password, and they will try to hack other systems with those credentials. So what we did, the technology industry about passwords, they say we will create rules. So we will force the users to create super secure passwords for remove this branch with the passwords, and happen situations like that one. Yeah, right? This grandpa create the password with P uppercase 123 and exclamation mark. So this also continue being a wake password, but is following all the rules. So again, the technology industry says, so that means to our rules are so wake. So we will create more strongest rules, right? Yeah. So this is insane. Then we came to some systems and happened things like that. You know, I will don't say which platform, but I always go to that platform and I stop to trying to make login. I always go directly to recovery password because this story happened to me all the time. So make a single signing on sucks, right, for users. So we can do for improve all this process and make it safer and easier, at least for the user side. So here is when we will talk about identity management, right? Identity management is something a little bit new, and it's basically an umbrella term that will be encourage all the things that we need to make about identity. And this is divided in 3 ones, that is the provisioning, the account management, and identity governance. We will start speaking about provisioning. Something that we need to take in mind in nowadays about handle identities in our systems is that identities now are something more complex. And then we also need to divide the identities that will make login in our system and the actors that works in our systems. I will put this in terms of a bank system. So for example, in a bank, I can have this corporative account. So that means that a company has an account in a bank. And this is the account that they are used for pay to their employees the salary every month. The fact is the owner of that account, that is the owner of the company, is not the guy that will ejecting those payments every month. It's an account that is hired in the company for handle this process. So what do the company is go to the bank and say, we will give access to this account guy, this counter, access to the account for they pay the salaries to all our employees throughout an account in the bank system. So this new counter is just an identity that will use the account of the bank, but is not an actor in the bank. So he's not the owner of this account and he's not an account. So he's just an identity, an entity that will access to that system. So in that case, this is our entity, and we will create an identity and some attributes for him to access the system. But also, we have a personal account. So I can go to the bank and create an account, and I am an actor of the bank, right? Because I am the owner of one account. And I also will be an identity because I can access to the system of the bank. But we need to split these things, and handling me as an actor of the system in the bank, that I have information in the bank, my personal information, and I also have different an identity that I will access the bank system for see my account state. And the next thing that we need to take in mind is that systems are not being only used for humans. So now we can have robots, we have IoT projects, we have voice user interfaces accessing to our system. So we need to also think how those entities that will don't have precisely a username and a password will access our system. The next thing is the account management. So here we need to think about many things, that how I will maintain those identities. Something really important is how save those information. Because when we have information of identities or also for users, it's not only about encrypt the password. We need to sit and ask, I will have sensitive information in my system. I will need to encrypt that information, or what strategies I will use for make to this that I have saved in the database don't represent real that person if someone accesses my database. So I will use encryption, which algorithms I will use for encrypt that information, or which keys I will use with those encryption. Also, we can use databases that encrypt the information or make a mask over the information. How that information also will be transferred from the database to my REST client. So also we need to ask what happened when we raise an account or someone delete their accounts, or what happened when these identities are longer inactive. So what happened with the backups that I am making from the database? This is all things that we need to think in the account management. And then finally, we have the identity governance. Identity governance is a little bit far away from only have roles in the system or dynamic permissions for one system. It's about that we can handle our entities or a system as a federated identity. So permit that many systems can make a login with this identity system that I am handling. So something that happened, for example, in big old companies is that sometimes, okay, we have a system for handle all the sellers stuffs. And we have a username and a password there. But then we have other system for handle all the employees that we have in the system, and will be the same person that we have access to see the information to the sellers and then see the information to the employees. But this person in the same company will have a username and a password for access the seller system, and then we have a different username and password for access the employee system. And this is because are different systems. So, and they create a different users module for handle every system. And when we can have in the same company, one same module for handle the usernames, those credentials, and those systems connect to this same one. This is what we need to take about in identity governance. Then we have the identity and access management. And here's how define how those users or these identities will access the system. How I will handle the authorization process, and also use identity federations for permit them access to the system. So we will define the easy one, that is the authorization part. So authorization basically is a term that we use for validate if that user has permission to access the information that they are requiring. So we receive this token, we validate this valid token that really represent that user, and also if that user has permission to access that information. So and then we have identity federation, and I pulled all these logos. So do you use here Facebook? Yeah? Yeah. So some places don't use Facebook, you know. So we have here a lot of logos. This is the Facebook normal. I don't know if you see, but Facebook called it Katana. Then we have Facebook Lite. We have Messenger that is called Orca. Then we have Messenger Lite. We also have here creator pages, announcement, analytics, Facebook 8. So we have a lot of applications. So why I have all those applications here is if, for example, I download first Facebook Messenger. I make login in that application. Then if I came and download the Facebook Orca, I don't need to make login again. What makes the application is verify if I make login previously in other applications. So they say, okay, yes, this person make login in other of our products, and we have the token for that, and we can share that token with you. So we are now logging in Facebook. They are using a identity federation of Facebook. Also, that happened when we can make a single signing on or a register with Facebook in other pages. So when I make that, I just may click in the Facebook and they check if I, for example, have an active session in this browser of Facebook, and I don't need to introduce the credentials. Also, indeed, if a site asks to you the credentials and you have an open session of Facebook there, this implementation is run because we don't need to reintroduce our credentials. So in the past, and this is something that continue being happens, so how we came to this approach. So we have a domain 1 and a domain 2. So imagine that we have, in domain 1, we have Katana, and domain 2, we have Orca. So in the past, if I make login in Katana, then I want to go to Orca, the browser cookies cannot be shared between two different domains. Also, indeed, with these domains are related, like Katana and Orca. So they say we need an approach that permits to us access this information. This is what was created for Federated Identity. And the idea is one domain that is related with other domain need to have access to this information saved in the browser cookies. So this is why they create in the free instance this identity provider. So that means that we need a third entity in the system that provide to us with these shaded cookies. So here now we have a third actor that will be a third domain that is the out server. So what happened is that now Katana, when we make login, will not make, so Katana will not save the token. If not, he will have a communication with the out server. And the out server will say, okay, yes, these credentials are correct. This is the token that I will share with you. But also, the out server will save this token in the browser cookies. So now when I go to Orca for make a login, Orca will be verified to the out server. So this user, we have an open session here, or we require make the login. And the out server will say, yes, I have a token here saved. So I will share that token with you, and we will permit to that person use both systems or more systems without the need to make a login again. So this is when we go to other systems and use them like Facebook or Google or Twitter or LinkedIn. And so what we are talking about that here is because we can offer to our users make a register and also login with these federated identities. So I will show you because exist more federated identities than just Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub. So we can choose any one of them or also make an evaluation about what we need here. So I saw that you have here, for example, UPS. Do you have here, for example, Amazon? Yes? Yeah, well, in Guatemala it's not Amazon. So for example, Amazon use UPS for permit to you, for send to you the things that you are buying in Amazon. So what happened in UPS is that I can go there and tracking these selling. So I can create an account in UPS with my Amazon account. So I don't need to create a new account in UPS. I can come and I will register with my Amazon account and I make a login with this federation identity of Amazon. Well, I stop there because it's the final of the, but this is interesting. We have some legal entities. So now we will talk about the authentication section. So this is how my users will make login. And the first thing is that we have the single signing on, right? That is the most common usage. So we will talk about the other ones. In this slide, I also have the federated identity management. In this case, is that I will implement in my system this federated identity for others use my system as an identity federation. So what happened with this approach of the single signing on? So this is something that have a long time that was discovered that was not so secure. So they say we need to improve the login process. So we not only need to ask something that users know, that is the password. If not, we need to ask something that they have of something that they are, that is the biometric session. So in this case, we make always the single signing on, and then we require to the user, I introduce a token, or we'll make a facial recognition, or we will see the fingerprint. And this is what we know now, like a multi-factor authentication. And we also have an approach like send an SMS code. For example, Google have this two-step verification, so I introduce my credentials, and I also will receive a code in my cell phone. This is other interesting application. This is called Guardian. So what we are doing here is make the login in the website, and this generates a QR code. Guardian is an application that we will have in our cell phone. So we'll go with the cell phone, we will make a scan of this QR code. And now we have registered this website in the applications that I will handle in Guardian. And I can allow or deny access to this website seen in my cell phone and give me permissions to access to this system. So for example, how many of you forgot to close your Facebook session in the university lab? Yes, exactly. And what happened that is like we suffer attacks. So someone said, oh my God, an open session, and they go and post on you a lot of things, wake things. So for example, with Guardian, if you remember that you forgot to close a session in a computer that is not your computer, you can come to Guardian and deny access to this site. So if someone wants to post something, we denegate the access or permissions to do that. Then we have the biometric section. So here are the methods like Touch ID with the fingerprint or facial recognition. We can have something more complex. We can make iris or retina recognition. We also can handle voice recognition. We can make that implementation with Twilio. We also have typing recognition. Also, some smartphones in nowadays came with typing recognition. So if someone takes your cell phone and they say you are not the owner to this cell phone because they detect to the typing is not that one. We also have DNA usage, right? So this sounds like a real security movie. And then we have passwordless. Passwordless really means permit make login with the necessity of a password. Also, that it don't exist a password in our system. So I will show you here a single diagram of application that can use passwordless. In this case, it's an application or a systems for companies. So what they are doing here before is verify if the system is being accessed by an IP address register, like VPNs, for example. So if it's not, they will require immediately a multi-factor authentication. If it's a registered IP address, they also are verifying AHEA offenses. So means this is a device that really is in the office, or if you are making work at home, that you are in the home or the place that you define it, that you will be. If yes, so you will access with any other requirement. If not, you always will be required make a multi-factor authentication. So this is for make things faster to employees in these systems, for example. Then we have the Touch ID. Something interesting about fingerprints is like our uniques. So in this diagram, we will take the fingerprint. And also we can create users using this fingerprint. So in this approach, is being verified if the user of the owner of this fingerprint exists or not in the system. If not exists, is created in the system, and then is generated the JWT. If the fingerprint exists in the system, is generated a JWT, and there is access in the system. Then we have the SMS code approach too. So in the case of the SMS that we will send codes, a good practice is the users create a password, because we as users not always are available to receive an SMS code. So maybe we need to permit to then make a simple signing on login. So in that case, the user introduces their username, and we will send a code to the cell phone. Also, it's good to ask the users that they verify their cell phones, because sometimes people change on cell phone, but they never make an actualization of the system. So if not, we will send an SMS code to a cell phone to that user don't have. And then we send the code, the user entered that code, and we permit to them access to the system. And finally, we have the magic link. So how many of you use Slack, for example? Yeah. Slack is like the master of the magic links, right? Just that we only can use them for make logging in the mobile applications, not in the websites. So what happened here is that we introduce our username, they send to us a link, that is the magic link, and we may click on the link and we are in the system. This is a really good approach because we also force users to verify the email address when they are making login in the system. So now we will have these best practices. So how we can have a successfully identity management project. Something that happened much in development is that sometimes, okay, we will make a new system. We have a new project. And the first thing that they say, oh, we have a module of users. Of course, all systems have users, right? They say, you know, copy the module of users that we have in other project. And this is done. But it's not like that. Every system sometimes have specific requirements of different ways to handle that. And also we need to think, for example, now that we are migrating legacy application, all those users pre-existing in other systems, and we need to migrate them to our system. And this is an approach that is not taken in advance. And the other things that the development industry is forgotten is that the entities have an entire cycle, a life cycle inside to our system. So it's not only make login. So here are a few questions that we need to make. And the first one is how the user's accounts will be created. So we need in this new project to the same user make a registration, or we will create, so a super administrator will create those users. How we will do, we send an invitation to someone to be to create an account in the system. And also we need to ask if those users exist in other systems, and I will need to migrate those users to my system. So how I will make that migration? And this is keep to us to the next question, that is, will users profile need to be synchronized? So I will came all those users for other system. And when we are making a synchronization or a migration to users to our system, we need to ask about how is handling this password in the other system. So the password was encrypted. I have access to the, well, I know the encryption algorithms, but I will have the keys for those for implement those algorithms. So I will can the unencrypt and encrypt these passwords, or I will need to require to all those users that they create a new password in this new system. So are things that we need to ask to us. The next one is usernames uniqueness. So sometimes we require to the user that create a nickname. Others, we use the email address, but for example, not always is needed that. I will put an example in this world that we are using federated identities. So for example, I use a platform that permit to me create an account with Gmail and with GitHub. The fact is that in GitHub, I am using my same Gmail address, but also the account permit to me have these accounts with Gmail and GitHub instead when are the same email address, because they are considering that as different accounts. So that means that they are using something different as username uniqueness, the username. They are creating a special nickname for them. The next thing is how will users make a login? So I really implement a single signing on, or I can skip that and offer just a passwordless, for example. So I really need in my system use multi-factor authentication. So how critical are the transactions that my users are doing inside the system? So I really need that they make, for example, two-step verification since the login, or for example, in banks, sometimes we make a single signing on, but only when I will make some specific transactions, like for example, transfer money to other account that is not my account, or between banks accounts or payment of services, they require me to access a token, for example. That is a second verification. So we really need the single signing on. The next one is really important, is which devices will be used in our system. So I have just a web browser, I will have mobile applications, or in this case, if we also need to ask if we will permit that a user have 2 open sessions. So for example, like Facebook, I can have open my Facebook page in my computer, and I also can stay watching Facebook in my cell phone at the same time. So I can have opening sessions in multiple devices. But for example, in banks, usually they require that you only have 1 open session. So if you are in the computer, you will use that in the computer. But if I make login, for example, in my cell phone, they will say, you have an open session, and for security, we'll open this other session that you didn't close. So if I go then to the website, they will say you cannot do nothing more because this is not a valid session. So these things we need to ask. The other things that work about devices is have a device history. So for example, WhatsApp, in WhatsApp, you use WhatsApp, right? So when we open sessions in the WhatsApp web or also in the desktop application that we have, I have a history of that in my cell phone. And I can go to my cell phone and say, I want that you close the sessions that I have in these browsers. So then if someone or also me go to this browser, they close that session and say you need to re-scan the QR code because this is not anymore a valid device for use this application. The next thing is what will happen when the user make a logout. Usually systems never handle this of the logout. So you just close the browser or then the time expires. But here is more when we are handling, for example, cookies. So what happened when the users may log out? I need to clean those cookies. I will really force the user to make logout. And there is other one, because sometimes people put the developers put the button of logout and you click logout. But then you make back in the browser and you also return to the application. So this is a wrong logout implementation because when someone make logout, instead if they go back or go to the endpoints to something inside the system, you need to require them make again login because supposedly they make logout, right? The final, well, we have more ones, but how sessions or browser configuration influence in sessions. And I have other systems, I will not say the name, but for example, if in that system, I just close my browser and then I open my browser, I want to make login again to that, they always show me a fail authorization thing, and I cannot make the login instead if I clean the cookies to that website. But the fact is, how is a user, a final user will know that they need to clean their cookies for can use our system because we make a wrong implementation handling cookies. Or for example, when something go wrong in the application. The next thing is session timeouts. So I can permit to my users have a permanent opening session or I will use a session timeout. The next one is the provisioning. What happens when it's over? And this is a little bit critical, especially in systems if our users can make something illegal, for example. So they came, use our system, make something illegal, then they just go and erase their account. So we will erase all the things to that user made. We will erase that information. Also, we need to say we have a data retention policy. So I will say, okay, you know, if you erase your account, we will save your information during 3 months or 1 year for stay safe. If something happened after that time, your information will be erased, but not immediately, for example. This is an interesting one, but it's the password reset. You will not imagine, but some developers forgot put a password reset. So you forgot your password and it's no way to you can access the system. So it's like content and administrator. Who is the administrator to this system? Who knows? So we need to put a password reset, right? Then how we block users. So How many times, and this happened, for example, in systems like Spotify, Netflix, that someone is not paying, so if you don't pay after 15 days, we will block your user until you pay again. Or, for example, we will have strategies like if you don't want anymore your account, we can cancel that account. You have a credit that need to pay. If you don't pay that, so we will stop your account. For example, in Amazon happens that you can put a ticket and say, I don't know that I need to pay, and say, okay, we will make that you don't pay, but you cannot create or use this account again. Then we have anomaly detections. Anomaly detection is that we really, for example, in the case of devices, usually we always use the same cell phone, right? But when we have a new cell phone, they say, you know, we detect an anomaly. This is a new cell phone that you never use it, so it's you. The other one is, for example, geographic locations. So we reside right now to you logging from Ukraine, and then you are making login in Guatemala. It's really you, this person? I have other example. This is other platform. What happened in that platform is that one guy was always trying to be hacked his account. And the platform, what may always is block that guy. And that guy said, but it's not me. It's someone trying to hack me. And the application was not detecting nothing, just that as failed login, and they were blocking him. And also he was reporting that. So they were not detecting devices or IP locations or nothing. The next one is privacy compliance requirements. I think this is not anymore a problem in Europe, but exist many systems that don't have a privacy policy about how to use the information to users. The next one is audit logs. Yeah. Everyone have faced of what happened. You know what happened is like, okay, you received the request in your client app, in that the login ones. And you know what happened is that people is printing all those JSONs in the logs, also the login JSON, with the username and the password unencrypted. This is the problem with logs. Sometimes we send to logs sensitive information that we need to encrypt. So anyone with access to the logs will have access to all that information. And the final one is consider how identity information will change over the time. So I need to, my users, make information actualization every single time. So I need to ask that. Then we have identity as a services. So one of the problems of this is implement all these in my systems, right? There is a lot of time, a lot of money, and usually we need to go to production faster. So we can have an identity as a service that provide to us all those options. So all the clouds have options for that. We have Azure Active Directory, Oracle Identity Management, File-based authentication. In Amazon, we have Amazon Cognito. I have here Auth0 because the Google Cloud Platform didn't implement an identity as a service. They make a partnership from Auth0 for use identity as a service in the Oracle Cloud. In the Java community, Okta is an identity as a service, really popular too, and also we have the WSO2. We have other identity as a service that also provide to us other options. For example, this ERSA security ID is also have for us tokens. And this is our other providers. And then we will talk about the architecture level. Oh my God, I have 2 minutes, okay. So what happened with architecture level is like now in our REST API, we are using microservices or serverless. So what happened in the microservices and serverless is that now we have new actors like the API gateway. So now it's not our services that are on charge to make the verification of tokens. If not, we will have this identity provider that also can be serverless architecture or other microservices. So the API gateway is the one. First, the client will have a communication with this identity provider for catch a token. And the API gateway is the one on charge to communicate with the identity provider for make that verification to these tokens. Unless verified that this token is properly signed, that is a valid token. Also happen the same in the serverless architecture. The API gateway will have a communication with this authentication service. So I will try to run in this 30-second my small demo that I have for API Gateway, but this is the repo when these slides are put in. This is my fan page if someone wants to follow me, or my Twitter. Also, you can tweet something that you like about the talk or you found really interesting about the talk. So I will skip this. Okay, no. Wait. Okay. So this is Insomnia. I will use Insomnia for consume the information. So I have this serverless in some platform that is called WebTask. So I can have free functions here, and just the restriction is that you only can have one request per second. So what I will do is return that our token is a valid token. Now I will show you my configuration in Express Gateway. That is the one that I am using. I think that you can see that. Okay, perfect. Okay, here I will have first the protocol. So I am saying that I'm using HTTP. If I am using HTTPS, I put HTTPS. And I am establishing that I will code my request in the 9000 host port. Then I establish the host. I will put that is open, but I can establish it, for example, a specific host. Then I am saying that will be my path mother identity management, and I will consume this by post. And I am putting here the URL that I will redirect this this endpoint in my API gateway, that is the endpoint to my serverless function. And I established two functions. The proxy always is there, and here I am putting the JWT. So here I will define the pipeline for this mother IDM endpoint. What I'm doing here is that I download the certification with the JWTs are signed in the other application that I am using. And I download that, and it's hosted here in my project. This is something feature specific for API Express Gateway. That is, if I will have some credentials for have communication with other systems, I am saying that no. And then I have here the proxy that is the mother IDM. So I will go here to the API gateway. So no, it's Insomnia. So here I have the validation of the token. I will make zoom here too. So I have here a run token, and I am running here my localhost port 9000 mother IDM. So if I send that, will say me that this is an unauthorized token, right? So I will go here to obtain a token to the other system. So I will obtain a token. This token will be signed with the same PEM key that I have downloaded and put it in my Express Gateway. Then I will return to the valid token header. And I will send that one here. Now it's a valid token, so redirect me to the serverless function and show me this, that my token is successfully validated. Also, I have here the endpoint to this WebTask token, and I will send also here and show me the same message, right? So I think that we don't have more time. I hope that you enjoyed that. If you have some question, I will be there for attend those questions. And thank you for coming.